So I'm not really going to be making a how-to video here. I just want to point out a few things that'll make the job easier. All you're going to do is you're going to take the front passenger seat, at least the front passenger seat out. If you're a big feller, you might want to take the driver's seat out too. But for me, just having the passenger seat out gave a lot of room. Take the doghouse off, and you're going to take all the air intake stuff off. Now don't take the doghouse off until you've taken off this air intake stuff and given it a good blow with compressed air. Big open area that looks a lot less intimidating. Okay, now your main obstacles here are going to be this wiring harness, and it's on both sides. It goes around the back and it wraps around. So there's up on top here, this bracket was down there, so this is all screwed there. There's 4 screws on top that hold this piece on. Well, there's 2 on each side, 2 on this side, 2 on that side. You're going to take those off and just push them to the side. Okay, also you want to put in your intake right here, put a bag to keep crap from getting in there. Okay, so same thing on this side. This piece here, that's the trans fluid dipstick tube, and it's bolted down along with this thing. So you're going to take that off. Then you're going to come over here and you're going to unplug this harness from this computer. The middle one you can leave because this is the harness going up this way. But the 2 that are attached to this harness, you're going to unattach. And that makes it so it's not so stiff. And really, in reality, you only have to move this thing out of the way by about 1 inch or 2, and you're going to be fine. On the other side, these 2 things, one was here, one was there. I just popped them off, moved them to the side, and that gives a little bit more room also. Of course, you've already disconnected the battery. Okay, so now that pretty much takes care of what you're going to disconnect up in the front side. This is the harness right here that you disconnected. There's the back screw bolts that hold it onto there, and this one just has a bracket right there, and I just unscrewed it. Move it to the side. Makes it a lot easier. Everything wiggles real nice. And that's all you need to remove. Now, look at all the room in there. There's a lot of room. There's the plugs are down here. Right along this way here. Actually, this is the fuel rail, and it is right above the coil packs. But I'm going to show you the tools I used, and you don't have to mess with that. Some videos on YouTube, people are removing the injectors, and they're removing all this stuff. You don't need to do that. Just get this harness out of the way, and you'll be fine. Both sides, same thing. Tons of room. There's all kinds of room in there. I was so intimidated by this thing that I've been thinking about it since I bought this van, about changing these damn plugs, and it just seemed like so overwhelming. And the reason I'm doing this video is because on YouTube, most of the videos that show how to do these Triton engines are for the F series, and the F series is a little bit different. There's some differences in it. Actually seems like it might be a little harder on the pickup trucks. So now you got all that stuff. Your next step is just going to be you're going to go through there with a 7mm wrench, socket wrench, and I'll show you what I used. and you're going to loosen up the screws that hold on all the coil packs. And then you're going to pull those coil packs out. And you're going to be doing a lot of spraying everything off with compressed air through this whole process. You want to use lots of compressed air. Actually, before you even take the coil packs off, once you got all this done, take your air. Again, I'll show you what kind of nozzles I used, and just spray the heck out of it. The reason I told you the first time don't take this back, the doghouse off, is because when you're spraying all that air from the front for the first initial time, there's going to be a lot of dust and you don't want it coming inside. So you spray it off real good with your air, and then come inside and do the same thing. After, you come in here, take your seat off, take off the doghouse, and then blast everything off really good in that direction, and it's going to go out the front. Okay, and that's going to be your initial getting rid of the crud that you don't want to go down and into the spark plug holes. So, okay, then after that you have pulled off your coil packs. You take your air nozzle, shove it down in each one of those holes where the spark plugs is, and blast everything out again. And we're going to be doing this a couple more times with the blasting air as time goes by, because you just don't want any crap getting down in there. But I think anybody can do this job. This is not hard at all. Look at all that room in there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff hanging down. It still probably looks a little intimidating, but there's just plenty of room. All those hoses and stuff, they're off to the side. They're not in the way at all. None of that stuff in the middle is in the way. And the type of tools you're going to use is going to make it so that you'll do just fine. And I'm going to show you all the coil packs out, and one of the spark plugs I took out so that I'd have the right number, part number. And I went and got all these new plugs here. Also got a serpentine belt because the one that's on there is cracked. The Ford Triton engines have a reputation of plug problems. Now, these kind of plugs, this is the type that they use in the 2-valve engines. And even though my van is an 07, if it was an F350, it would have the 3-valve engine, but they never use the 3-valve engine in the vans, which is good, because the 3-valve engines are the ones that have the plugs that break off. Now these 2-valve engines have the plugs that only grip by about 2 or 3 threads, and if you don't torque them down right, they have a tendency to blow out and take the threads with them. Then you got to put a Healy coil. And I loosened all the plugs already. I haven't taken them out, but I loosened them all. And one of them was not even finger tight, and 2 of them were just finger tight. I want to show you how these coil packs work. Now, if you're lucky, they'll come off like this with the boot attached. But if it does, there's a possibility that the boot right in this area is going to be stuck on the spark plug, and when you pull out, you're going to come out with this, and this part here is going to stay on your spark plug. So not to panic. This will be sticking out and you'll see it. Just spray some WD-40 down there in that hole, and then just give it a few minutes, a couple minutes maybe, or a minute to soak in. And then you take a screwdriver and stick it down there, and it's going to go down in between this boot and the spark plug, and then you can kind of go like this, and it's going to break loose, and that WD-40 is going to get in there, and bam, you're going to pull it out. No problem. So I'm ready to put these coil packs back on, and what you want to use is some of this stuff. It's dielectric grease. It lubricates this area in here where the spark plug sits. Shows you right on there where to put it. And next time you go to do a plug change, those things are going to come right off. Here's the tools I used. This is a 1/4-inch drive. It has the extensions are these wiggly extensions. So see, they're undercut here so that the socket can wiggle around. Now this tool, and sometimes you need to use that along with it, I used for removing the coil packs. Mostly you can just use this extension, but in a couple of places you want to be up above a couple of things that are there, like the dipstick tube for the transmission. So I'll put that on there and that'll do it, and then you just use the proper socket. Now for the spark plugs, I use this socket, this ratchet with the articulating head, and I use the same kind of extensions. See this, they wobble. And in most cases you could get with just this, and if you need to get up above something, put that on there. And then for putting them in, I used another wobbly, see how that wobbles, another wobbly extension. This is a long one, maybe like 10 inches long, 11 inches long. And I used it because I was using, for torque. I just figured one solid piece is going to work better. And this is a 5/8, 3/8 drive socket for spark plugs, and it's got a magnet inside. So you definitely want to get one with a magnet, because the spark plugs are down in a hole and you need to have a way to pull them out of there. So with just these tools alone for doing the spark plug job, that's all you need. You need a couple of other different size sockets and maybe an end wrench or two for taking the stuff off that you need to take off. But everybody's got this stuff. This is just stuff. This is Harbor Freight tools that I bought and to keep in the van. So I just went ahead and used those. And whatever people say about Harbor Freight tools, unless you're some kind of pro, they're going to work just fine for you. Okay, and then I also used these air guns that have long tubes on them, and that's for blowing all that stuff out from inside the engine compartment. And then this one I used for getting down into, because there's a piece of copper pipe, so I can bend it and get right down inside the holes where the spark plugs are. And the way I did that is I took the coil, I blew everything off really good. And then I took the coil packs off, and then I blew everything, like I blew out all the holes real good. And then I broke all the spark plugs loose. Now, if they all broke loose fine for me. If they wouldn't have, I would have sprayed some PB Blaster down in there and let it sit overnight. But everything worked out fine. So I broke all the spark plugs loose to make sure that everything was going to be going okay. And then I took out one spark plug at a time. And after I broke them loose, I blew it out again with this thing before I took the spark plug out. Then I took the spark plug out, and then I stuck this way down inside the hole, so I was probably touching the top of the piston, and I blew it again. And then I put the spark plug in one at a time, doing one at a time. You don't want to take out all the spark plugs and start blowing stuff around, because then you're just never going to get that dirt out of there. But I did one at a time. And the kind of spark plugs that I used, or well, the kind that are recommended, have the coated, they're coated, with nickel on the threads. This was the spark plug. Now the original spark plugs, the number on those was the old number, because they were the ones that came and it's the old number is AGSF22N, and so these are the new spark plugs, and they're platinum. They got the plating. So when you use spark plugs that have plating, you don't need to use the anti-seize compound. And this is a big debate on the internet about, do you need to use the anti-seize or not use the anti-seize. I didn't use anti-seize because the Motorola says you don't have to. What I did, and what I've always done, and I've had a lot of cars with aluminum heads, because I'm kind of a Toyota freak, and so I've had a lot of Toyota trucks. I've had motorcycles with aluminum heads. I've had Volkswagens, and I've never stripped out spark plug threads before. So what I always do is just put a little drop of grease on the plugs, or not grease, but oil on the plugs before I thread them in there, so they're not going in dry. And that's it. I also use the torque wrench, and as far as torquing goes, that's kind of a controversial thing too, because Ford's original specs for torquing was 11 foot-pounds, and that's what with that 11 foot-pounds is when we're getting a lot of spark plugs that were loosening up and blowing out. So they upped the torque value to 14 foot-pounds. And at 14 foot-pounds, there was a lot less of that happening. And I don't know, I don't know if it was the factory or just some wise guy said, let's do them to 16 foot-pounds. So they everybody started torquing them to 16 foot-pounds, and at 16 foot-pounds, the problem was pretty much gone. Now, some other really into mechanics guys came along, and they started doing tests, and they got ahead, and they started torquing down spark plugs to see how much they could torque them down before they stripped out the threads. Well, they got to the point where they were torquing the spark plugs down to 100 foot-pounds, and the threads were not breaking, and the only thing that was happening is the spark plugs were breaking off. So the heads are good for at least up to 100 foot-pounds. So at some point after that, these guys came up with the idea of, let's torque the spark plugs down to 25 foot-pounds. And then I don't know how, I don't remember exactly what I read about how this happened, but then that number changed to 28 foot-pounds. So basically, all the guys that are Ford guys that think they know what they're doing are torquing them down to 28 foot-pounds. And what I figured is, if 16 foot-pounds solve the problem, then why go to 28? But what I did do is I torqued them down to 20 foot-pounds because, well, just a little extra measure of safety. And to tell the truth, at 20 foot-pounds, they did not feel tight in there. I was tempted to go a little further, but I just left them at that. And I think probably at 10,000 miles, I'm going to pull off all the coil packs and re-torque the spark plugs, see if they need it. But I just started up fine, just like it always did. I'm really just like kind of amazed that that one spark plug was in there, just not even finger tight, and there was nothing. I mean, there was no sign that that was happening. But when I blew out the cylinders, I noticed that on that one cylinder, I could smell unburned gas, and all the other ones that I blew out, I didn't. So I don't know if that meant anything or not, but so that's it. I did that job. That was something that I thought was going to be really terrible to do, but I did it. It probably took me about 5 hours. I also replaced the belt, the serpentine belt. So if I got one from AutoZone yesterday, but it turned out to be the wrong one. So if you are going to replace the belt, this is the part number. Napa, it's a Napa part. And that's the part number right there. Fit perfect. Keep your old belt as a spare, just in case. Maybe even keep a couple of the old spark plugs and throw them in your toolbox, and you're good to go. Next thing I'm going to do is change the rear end fluid.